All right. Welcome to the 2x2 podcast. Back with us this week.
Yeah.
The podcast champion of the world, Jonathan Brewster. He's Jonathan. I'm Danny. We are from Burlington Baptist Church. We are happy to have you guys today. We're finishing up the Book of Ruth.
Yes.
Got worship night coming up. Pretty excited about that. All sorts of things going on in church. When we were talking at the meeting yesterday, I was just looking at the calendar and I was like, we got a lot of stuff coming up. Yeah. And it was like everybody has something going on, which is great. I mean, which is what it should be. And it's kind of, I guess, after maybe got a little lazy during the COVID kind of crisis where there wasn't as much going on, so there was a little bit more space in the schedule. I looked over at Joanne's calendar. I was like, oh man, we are busy, which is good. It's a good thing to have, good problem to have. So thank you for joining the 2x2 podcast today. I'm going to go through our sponsorship, but we have a request. We have a write-in that you and I are going to cover today.
Yeah.
They put the A-team on it. Harold was so nervous because we actually had somebody write in and ask us a question that he sent the A-team to take care of it. But we are sponsored today and always by CrossFit Northern Kentucky. I like to say the world leader in fitness. That's not their slogan. That's just something that I made up. But they're a bunch of buddies of mine, great people. Go to them for all of your health and fitness goals. Kentucky Olive, purveyors of fine oils and balsamics. And I found out Sunday, I pepped up the cheese, the jalapeno cheese. And evidently, some people showed up for the jalapeno cheese. And it's been so popular, they don't have any right now. But they have other cheeses. So, just to show you, if you're a potential sponsor, just to show you the reach of our podcast, we sold them out of jalapeno cheese, but I feel responsible for that. But no, Tom and Tanya and them, they've got a ton of stuff going on over there. He's always advertising something, and it's like right at lunchtime, it pops up on my Facebook feed. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that stuff looks good. I'll take all that. Tattoo Tina's. 7 Shelby Street, the most beautiful and talented tattoo artist in all the land, followed closely by our daughter, who's the second most talented and beautiful tattoo artist in all the land. Alec, her husband, might argue, but he's wrong. So go see them at 7 Shelby Street. Doing really good. It's Roxy's second or third week. She really kind of hit the ground running, which is pretty awesome. So Serious Archery Products and Tough Head Broadheads. They are putting out a ton of stuff on social media now, and it's all pretty good. Yeah. Seth is very driven, so he's difficult to deal with sometimes. He's a good friend of mine. I can say that. He's not going to watch this either, but he might. But the stuff they're putting on YouTube, they did a bunch of broadhead testing. They did some hog and javelina hunting and the iguana hunts on there. Like they've got a pretty good channel going, so go check them out. Serious Archery Products and Tough Head Broadheads. By Steak and Shake. Brother Michael's Steak and Shake is back. I know that because he was giving me a hard time before the service. He likes to poke at me and whatnot. Yeah. So he must be feeling much better, but it's always really good to see him. And Answers in Genesis, our friends at Answers in Genesis. So I found out that Elise Hannah is doing the reading this week.
Yes, yeah. Elise.
That's where Hannah Elise did it 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So I told Hannah that I'd pay it forward.
Okay.
Yeah. So Elise is going to be probably Hannah on Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah. You may want to warn her. I'm pretty sure she knows it's coming.
Okay.
So pray us in, and then we're going to get to our listener question.
Yeah. All right. Father, thank you for this time that we have to be together to just discuss some more of the Book of Ruth and to just have a good time. God, we love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Okay, so we have a question. It's from my dad. He didn't send it to me. He sent it to Harold, which is probably smarter. Because he knew if you sent it to Harold, Harold told me one of the two of us could potentially remember. But when you left off in your sermon, Boaz had just told Ruth, there's someone in line before me. We're going to give him the opportunity. Okay. So we're going to try to do this as linear as we possibly can.
Yeah.
I don't do well with linear stuff, so we'll see where this goes.
Okay. I'll just let you spider web it out.
Okay. Well, so, which is what he should have done. We knew from chapters 2 and 3 and 1 he is a person who wants to observe doing the right thing and doing the right thing. Would there have been anything wrong with him? Would there have been any? Let me ask it this way: would there have been any repercussion for Boaz when she curled up next to him and said, "Redeem me"? If he'd have said, "Okay."
Yeah, I mean, I think he just wouldn't have been doing things rightly.
But there wouldn't have been really any external pressure that would have been. I mean, she was of marrying age, and she was, so it wouldn't have looked good.
Yeah.
But there wouldn't have been any external pressure from people going, well, you can't do that. He's got first dibs on this, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was,
Yeah.
So what happens?
Yeah, so he says, I will redeem you, but there's somebody who's closer in that line, closer relative than I am. And so if he wants to redeem you and to take that land and everything, then he gets to do that. But if not, I'm still here.
Oh, good. Okay, so that will lead us into our question from our esteemed listener, my dad. So he sent it to Harold. He said, you spoke of the Redeemer in the sermon. What were the qualifications of the Redeemer, and how did one get to be a Redeemer? Was this a, quote, special position? Maybe explain it on the podcast. So let's go through real quick before we get to let's get to the qualifications of the Redeemer. What is the main qualification?
Yeah, so we see that back in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and the law. So it's talking about how they take care of the land.
Right.
And so all of the land that they have is given to them by God.
Right.
And so they're almost more stewards of their property than actual landowners, if that makes sense. So it's all land that God gave them, and he said, hey, this is your family land. And so they work to keep that land within the family. They have a patriarchal society, so it goes through the men. And if there are no men, then no one can take care of that land and inherit that land.
Right. We talked a little bit about that last week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so if something happened to a man and he died before he had children, and that inheritance was kind of up in the air, then a close relative, so maybe a brother or farther out the farther you go, would marry the woman who was left behind and would redeem that relationship.
Right. So, yeah, sorry, the table's jiggly. Yeah. So just to verify, or just to kind of modern times it, it's not like there was an estate sale.
Right.
And all these people came in and said, well, I'll buy this and I'll buy this because she doesn't have a man or she can't afford it either way. Right. And they don't have any male heirs. So the responsibility fell to the closest relative male. Okay. We know that. You and I know that.
Yeah.
Now the listeners know that.
Yeah.
What is the responsibility if the closest living male is already married?
So if the closest living male was already married, he would take another wife in that society.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they
I wanted to throw that out there. Yeah.
So they had a society where they would take several wives, and they protected the women in the society that way.
Right.
But it was not ideal and not the plan that God had in place. But
so I've had this conversation with a lot of people where they'll give me, doing a lot of weddings, right? You'll find people that will go, well, everybody talks about weddings and Bible and marriage and all this other stuff. And they said, well, there was people that had like multiple wives in the Bible. I said, there were. And they said, well, how do you explain that? I said, do me a favor. Go read all those stories, see what the outcome was, and let me know if it's still a solid plan.
Yeah, it didn't quite turn out right for them many times.
So Boaz goes, so before we get there, what is the responsibility after you take that wife as far as children?
Yeah, so you would have a child. You would, work toward having a child. You would try to have a male child because that would follow the line.
Right.
And the male child that you had would actually act legally as the son of the one who died.
Right.
And so it would carry on the lineage that way.
Right.
So there was a cost to it.
Sure.
Because there was kind of the cost of your own inheritance with that, because you were, taking care of someone else's property and someone else's wife through that. And so, not everyone is willing to or wanting to do that in that situation, because it can jeopardize their own inheritance.
And, and I mean, if you look at it, right, you got a plot of land, and you're assuming the wife and the responsibility of that land until you can pass it back on. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because what if you and I are brother-in-laws or brothers, right? And I didn't take as good a care of my stuff as you took of your stuff. Now you've got to man that field, right? I mean, that's your responsibility. It's officially your responsibility.
Yeah.
And and then you have a child, which is technically, I mean, it's your child, but that child is to now officially act as the child as the person who is deceased. So that male child is going to take this over when you are gone, which is a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, so you have to think about that. So and that plot of land could be half the size of the one you're farming now, or 3 times the size of the one you're farming now. You don't know. Well, they knew, but I mean, you didn't know.
Yeah.
Right.
And there was, there was at least some desire to do that, because we see that in chapter 4, and in the fact that, Boaz goes to this other redeemer, and he seems at least interested at first about the idea of getting more land. Right. Because the more land you have, the more crop you can produce and that sort of thing.
But Boaz didn't give up.
Right.
What did he do?
So we've got Boaz goes and meets with this guy, and so they start talking about the right of redemption and how that guy is closer and how the field is kind of up for grabs. Right. And the man says that he wants to redeem it because that would allow him to have more property. And Boaz is like, okay, cool, but when you do that, you're also going to get this Moabite woman who you will have to marry, and her mother-in-law, because they come package deal with the land.
Right. Why would he initially almost immediately go, no, I'm out?
Yeah.
What was it about Ruth that made her undesirable to this particular fellow?
So the big thing was she was a Moabite. So she was...
and I don't know if we talked about this. I can't remember. What was Moab to these people?
Enemies.
How bad?
Very, very bad. So, you go back and you look at the story of Lot and his daughters, and kind of the incestuous union that created Moab, and the fact that, it started off rough and continued
just got rougher,
going against God, continually against God. And so they, there was a lot of inherent dislike between the two countries. They were not to intermarry, because as they intermarried, that brought the chance of bringing their gods and their culture and everything into the Israelite people. And so there was, hesitation for that. Right.
So I wanted to cover that because, again, I'm not sure that we did. I think there's some times, and I think that everybody does this, and I'm not picking on Harold or you or me, but there's some times I think my familiarity with the story, I understood. I don't think the average reader, and I could be wrong, doesn't understand. She was like Blacklist. Yeah. Right? This is an enemy inside of our family, inside of our gates. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Which Naomi and her husband probably dealt with at one point. And I think Naomi's interesting too, and we don't have to touch too much on that, but Naomi's interesting too, because you think Ruth is her daughter-in-law, a Moabite girl that was married to her son, and now she has to send her to another person. So she's basically going, my son is gone, I need to find someone fitting. That'd be tough, right? Yeah. I don't know if I'll be able to go, well, I want you to marry this person because I think they're going to be as suitable as my son. Nobody's going to be as suitable as your son, and nobody, which I think is kind of an interesting part of the story. Yeah. So the statement is made, I can't redeem it myself, or I will ruin my own inheritance. Why did he say that?
Well, I mean, his child would be in the line of Elimelech, and his child would inherit those things, and so it would not be the same as him having his own son.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, is it possible that bringing a Moabite into this situation would cause any kind of family turmoil?
Oh, I'm sure it would. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely would. And, I love the irony of this situation and the fact that this Redeemer is wanting to protect his name and protect his family name. And
which is exactly what got us here in the first place.
Yeah. And we've got, the Redeemer. There is another man, Boaz, said to the Redeemer, come over here and that kind of thing. So we don't see his name in there. So his name was left out of the history of the world. So, he was so worried about that and everything, but he was, not willing to redeem it. And, we believe that he would have had the resources to do it because he was ready to buy it whenever it was just land. But he didn't have the resolve to do it and refused to.
Okay. So now, at an earlier period in Israel, a man removed his sandal and gave it to the other party in order to make a matter legally binding.
What a blessing. What a blessing.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
It's not like they had a priceless set of Air Jordans, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're giving you one of them, which is odd, right? Mm-hmm. But these are farmers around dirt, walking behind animals.
Yeah.
That use the bathroom wherever they feel like.
Yeah.
And you're popping this joker off your foot and just handing it to the other guy.
Yeah.
That is a terrible way to seal a deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think, do you know this? Do we know the history of that or why?
I don't know a ton about personally. One thing that I do know that I think is awesome about this is you think about Boaz being kind of like an old-fashioned guy.
Right.
He cares about doing things rightly. Mm-hmm. And I think this would be similar to when we talk about business deals being sealed with a handshake.
Right.
And that's an old-fashioned thing now because, when we buy property and things like that, it's like, here's 700 sheets of paper.
Yeah.
Sign them. Good luck knowing what's on them, and good luck with what you're signing up for.
Have you closed on your house?
We're working on it.
Okay, well let me give you a piece of advice that I guarantee every person watching this who's bought a house will tell you. Mm-hmm. When they slide that truth in lending statement over to you, do not look at it.
Yeah.
Just sign the bottom. Don't look at the numbers.
I'm not sure that that's good advice for everybody.
No, it is, and I'm going to explain to you why. But the truth in lending statement shows what the bank is loaning you, the cost of the home, and if the loan goes to term, the amount you will pay overall in the course of your lifetime.
Yeah.
I made the mistake the very first time that I bought a house of looking at that truth in lending statement.
Yeah.
And it literally made me sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
So the rest of the time I didn't remember anything except for how am I not going to puke on all of this white paper that they printed out and made me sign. So that's a piece of advice for you. I promise.
Yeah.
Because because immediately your mind starts going, you're analytic. So your mind's going to start going, how is that? Doesn't seem possible. Like this doesn't seem like it's even remotely possible.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's an exchange of sandal. I don't know. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to try to find some history on that because I believe that would be putting someone in an inferior position. Here's my sandal. I am now standing with just one and one barefoot. That kind of seems, so, they were very, they were very inferior position type when they made deals. When you split the animal and the person would walk through the middle and that kind of thing. So a lot of their deals seem to be that set up that way. So, but I'm going to try to find that. So Boaz makes the statement. He is going to buy Naomi's land and he's going to marry Ruth. Right. So do we know anything about Boaz and his family?
A little bit.
What do we know?
Yeah. So we see that in Matthew in the genealogy of Jesus.
Nice, dude. I mean, you just came out, no problem. I'm pretty impressed because I didn't tell you that was coming. Go
Okay.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So we see that in Matthew, and we see that his dad, we see his name, and we see that his mother was likely Rahab. And so, when you think about someone who is primed to take a foreign woman as a wife, and you think, oh, well, Boaz's mother was a foreign woman. And so Boaz is probably a little bit more receptive to that idea in that culture.
What was her job?
She was a prostitute. Yeah. Yep.
Well,
So,
and we joke about that. But last week when we talked about, there was a few jobs ladies could have without a. I mean, that's the main one, right?
There wasn't much you could do, and she was also living outside the Israelite community, and so she
could they serve. They could serve another way. I think. I'm trying to recall. I should have looked it up. I had a whole week. You'd think I'd be able to slide that in, but I think it was something. Was it somewhere around like food? Somehow, I think.
Well, there were male and female servants in the Book of Ruth, because we talk about Boaz telling Ruth to hang out with the female servants in the field instead of the male servants. And so, I mean, there were servant positions and there were prostitution type positions, but there wasn't like, this is Naomi, the real estate mogul. You know what I mean? So they didn't have much in the way of options there.
She didn't have little signs all around the Holy Land going, Naomi sells, pointing. Not making fun of anybody who has those. I'm just saying. There wasn't much options, right? There wasn't. There wasn't much option. It's interesting, right? If you think about, and I don't want to get too far to down the prostitution rabbit hole, but if you think about, people now, you or I or anybody would go, how in the world could a person do that? Or could they get in a position? But you're thinking about people who are, if I'm going to eat, I have to make some money to buy some things and to do these which is awful, but that's what your choices were. It's either sometimes
the temple would provide for them, and the people were supposed to provide for the widows and provide for the poor, and so there was provision in there, and so I think a lot of that was choice, and if you were willing to take that which was provided, or if you were trying to make and earn more to have a different type of lifestyle. Right. So
I'm not sure that's a fair trade for me. I think I would have stuck with the temple.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
But, so we're married. We're getting married. Boaz, Ruth, they're going to get married. Moabite coming in. So, and Harold kind of ended with it, and I think we got a little more time. Look at us. We're being efficient today.
Yeah. Working on it.
So we're in the line of Jesus, which is why this story becomes so important. Right.
Yes.
So when you look at the family of David or the line of Jesus Christ, and Harold pointed this out, you see a lot of flawed people. In our Sunday school class, we talked about David. But at the end of his kingship, he was a mess, man. He had seen Bathsheba. He had put her husband on the front line. He had murdered, adulterer. The prophet comes to him and says, someone's child's going to die. And this, well, David, let it be so, right? Well, it's your kid. I'm talking about you.
Yeah.
So there's a whole just disastrous mess of things that are going on. What do you think that means overall? That's a hard question.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what I think, and then you can kind of expound on that. That God was so perfect in his design for Jesus' delivery since Genesis 3:15, the proto-evangelium that we all know about. First time he was ever mentioned. Immediately after man's sin, I'm providing a way, right?
Yeah.
Which he probably had before, right?
Yeah.
Because it's God. And
he wasn't surprised.
Right. So I'm going to tell you something that I heard. It's funny, but in a minute. Then you get down the line here, and you understand the imperfection of your creation, right? And this, again, I don't know if I've ever read this. It's just something that I kind of see. You understand the imperfection of your creation so much that you have a harlot, you have just a group of imperfect people, and out of those imperfect people, you deliver the perfect human.
Oh, yeah.
Yourself, part of the Trinity in human form, to be the Redeemer for the entire world. I mean, it's just an amazingly beautiful picture. I'm going to even the line of Jesus, I'm going to take from just dirty rags, basically, which is what we are ultimately. And I'm going to deliver perfection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too, whenever we look at the Old Testament, sometimes we get so stuck in this idea of like God chose the Israelite people, and God was just for the Jews, and then all of a sudden in the New Testament, it's like, oh, God's for everybody. But you start to look through the Old Testament, and you start to see God's mission for all people, and you're like, oh, He brought these people in, and He brought these people in, and you know, I think we miss that a lot of times because we get so focused on
Yeah, I certainly see that. Mm-hmm. I think it's important enough to know too is God has a plan, right?
Yeah,
He is allowing you to decide to do things that are outside of that specific plan, but it never derails Him from delivering the perfection of that plan. Because He can take your mess and He can square that back around.
Yeah.
I think about Solomon a lot in that particular thing. Solomon was the wisest person ever, right? According to the Bible and according to that time, he was David's son. He was the wisest person, the wisest king. So wise that he took multiple wives from different areas of the world and thought in his plan that I'm going to make Israel more powerful because I'm going to indoctrinate all of these lands with our law and what happened? Backfired, right?
Nothing good.
No, complete backfire. All of these people that he brought in from different areas, their religions and their idol worship and all the just invaded Israel, right? But was God able to take that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We find out that He still delivered Jesus through all of this mess. He still saves Israel. He still, you know what I mean? He still has that plan. And I don't know, of course I can't answer for God, but did he know that was going to happen? Sure, he knew that Solomon was going to make some bad decisions. Doesn't derail his plan. That's a hard thing, I think. The whole story, when you look at Jesus's lineage, which is right here, they actually put it in my book, in this Bible. When you look at that and go, was that God's initial intent? I don't know. I can't answer that. But does it bother Him a little? Not a little bit. It doesn't bother me a little bit if this person slid in that wasn't supposed to, or this person got here, it wasn't supposed to. I think that's hard to translate to people nowadays where they say, why would God put me in this position to where I'm going through a divorce? Why would God put me in this position where, I just don't feel loved? Why would God put me in this position where this terrible thing has happened? Well, it was choices that were made that got you there. Some of them good, some of them bad, some of them inside of His will, some of them outside the will. But the overall picture doesn't keep God from delivering you to what He wants. And that's a hard, and that's what we have, right? I mean, this is kind of Naomi's deal. She sets her up in a bad way, unsafe way, not a bad way.
Yeah.
An unsafe way. And even though she puts her in a position where she's like, redeem me, marry me, make me okay, bring Naomi back to her land, bring me back. I'll do that, but we're going to do it right. We're going to do it the right way. But God's plan worked out the way it was supposed to work out because it wasn't necessarily for Naomi to go off script.
Yeah.
Even though she did, He's good. So, I mean, did I do a good job of explaining that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing too is just that we see that this line that God had planned is intact.
Yes.
And regardless of what happens around that, that line remains intact.
We can try to human that up.
Yeah.
But He's going to... That's a better way. That's a much better way than I explained it. I just took like 5 minutes to do it. But we can human this mess up. But ultimately, He's going to deliver.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's unique about Ruth and kind of the way it's situated in the Old Testament is we have this return to that line. Right. Because you read through Genesis, and it's super easy to follow the line. Right. Because you can follow Adam and Eve to Seth, and then it goes down, and we have another kind of pinch point when we've got Noah and his family, and then we've got the actual choosing of Abraham, Abraham, leads to Isaac, leads to Jacob, leads to Judah and his other 11 sons.
Right.
And then from Judah, we get Perez. And then they spend time in Egypt being slaves and wandering in the wilderness. And we see all of that through Exodus. And then we see God rise up Moses and Joshua to protect that people and protect that land.
Right.
And then protect the line. And then we have Judges and all kinds of crazy stuff happens. And then Ruth.
Getting us back to an order. Or
it's like here's the reset. Remember that line.
Right.
We left off at Perez. We didn't talk about it for a while.
Right.
But that's still happening. God is still working in the background and making that happen.
And I will challenge people because it's one of my favorite books is if you want to see how God will use regular people to do extraordinary things, and some people just the whole book of Judges. I mean, this is one of my favorite Old Testament books. There's some hard reading in there, I mean, when you get to Jephthah and his daughter and things like that, there's some hard reading in there. And there's some where you might have to read them 8 or 9 times ago. Did it? What? Jephthah kept his vow. What do you mean? Those kind of things. But Gideon, Samson, all of these people, and it's like, these people are not good people. Samson broke every vow he was supposed to keep. Every one.
Yeah.
Everyone. Touching unclean things. Wouldn't marry a Jewish girl. Wouldn't, cut his hair. All of these things, right? Don't drink. Okay.
Can't trust people who cut your hair.
Oh, no. Those people are the least trustworthy people. So, I never tried to weave anybody's into a rug first, though.
Yeah.
So, and then you get to, and then you kind of get out of that back to Ruth, where you're going to see God go, I'm still your king. I see that you want an earthly king. I'm going to grant that to you.
Yeah.
Right. So the reset, like you talked about, it's a great way to put it. So give me, what are your major points, Jonathan? And you gave me one of them just now, which is pretty much the major point of it. But give me a couple major points to focus on for our listeners that want to go back and read Ruth.
Yeah. One of the biggest things for me is this focus on the transitions that Naomi goes through and kind of how that demonstrates our own salvation.
Yep.
Because we have Naomi initially in her despair.
Right.
And then we have Naomi and her dependency on Ruth and Boaz, ultimately God. And then Naomi's delight at the end with the birth of a son. And so when we think about our own lives, we are born in our despair. We're born in sin and born in brokenness. And the only thing we can do to get out of that is to depend on the saving work of Christ. Nice. So the fact that Christ came to save us and to take the weight of our sin, and we turn to him and follow him, and now we live in that delight of our salvation. So in the same way that we leave this with Naomi in delight of the birth of this son who saved them, we live in the delight of the birth of a son who saved us.
Right. So it's a Christophany, and just like a lot of Old Testament stories, when you look at it and you go, oh, that's a picture of Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a beautiful little story.
Right. So I think we've covered pretty much everything, and I think we've made it in our time frame so far. But let's turn, before we pray out, let's turn to some stuff we've got going on. Worship night this Sunday, 6:30. Jonathan's going to bring a short message in Colossians.
Yes.
And it's going to talk about what we were made for.
Yes.
What we were made for. And that is pretty good. We've got a wide selection of songs. Some are fast, some are slow. It's going to be fun. I think a lot of times these worship nights, the team enjoys them more. I get a lot of good positive feedback because it's just a lot of singing and it's not a lot of talking and it's, all these kind of things. But I get a lot of positive feedback, but I think our team really just likes to get not a Sunday morning where there's just kind of, and not that we don't love, we obviously love Sunday morning, but it's kind of nice for them to get a break. And you know what? Let's just sing some songs. Let's just get up here and sing, and we're probably going to make mistakes and that kind of thing. But they really like that as well, which I do too. And what else? We got a ton going on. Easter's coming up.
Yeah, Easter's coming up.
We got Good Friday. Sunrise service at 7 a.m. over at the park. 8:30. No Bible study, and then 10:45. So 4 services from Friday to Sunday. What Do you remember? Do you remember what time Good Friday service? Or no, yeah, Good Friday service.
I do not.
There's a flyer coming around.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple weeks before, so we will get that time and we will get it on here.
Heavily announced.
Yes. And what about you guys?
We've got a lot going on between college and student ministry. Yep. We've got a hockey game coming up. We've got a spring break trip coming up for the high schoolers, middle schoolers, going to Panama City Beach, Florida. Going to study the Book of Ruth together.
Nice.
So that's going to be a good time. We've got camps coming up this summer, mission trips, young adult retreats, all kinds of stuff coming up.
I always think about when I see you sometimes, I'm always like, when God said, or Jesus said, come to me and I'll give you rest, you heavy laden. You feel like yesterday we had the staff meeting and you got in at like 1 something in the morning from Hearts on Fire. Was it Hearts on Fire?
No, it was Winter Jam.
Winter Jam, sorry.
Yeah. Yep. It's always great when there's a huge wreck on the only interstate that leads the way home. So good thing it was college students and young adults.
And you know what the funny part is I can bet you that at one point of that trip while you're sitting, you're probably the only person in the car who's loosened.
Well, we were all pretty awake.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, it was a good time, but it's always scary when you pull up Waze and you're getting ready to make your way home, and it's like you'll be there at 4:55, and you're like, no, we will find another way.
No, that's not when we're gonna get home.
Yeah.
So, well, good deal. We still have a ton of stuff going on here at church. Look at the newsletters. I can't remember. I know that there's some mission work that's coming up that Ken and Greg are doing.
Yeah, the April 3rd through the 8th, they're going to Western Kentucky.
Again, and I know that, Harold and Jeff have been a couple of different places now, and Harold's preaching down in Oneida today, so we'll pray for him. But, there's just so much going on, and which is awesome. I wish that we were better at remembering or writing things down so that I can remember. So it's not, I could go down the calendar of my phone, but there's all sorts of things in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some more stuff hitting them right now, actually, as I pull my phone.
Stay tuned for more.
I was going to say, something just popped in. I'm like, there's more things hitting the thing. So I'll pray us out of here.
All right.
Lord, we thank you again just for this book and just for your word, Lord. And thank you for the opportunity to dig into these things deeper and just discover all of the messages you have within. Lord, just thank you for the ability that you have for us to try to human up and mess up these plans, but Lord, you deliver every single time on everything that you say that you're going to do. And we thank you so much for that. And most importantly, we thank you for your son, Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Good job. Nice one.